Today, Catholicism turns out in the crosshairs. Hello and welcome to RotD Review of the Day, and today I'm taking a look at the 1999 movie Stigmata. This was one that I wasn't quite sure about reviewing, and here's why. I remember watching this sometime soon after it first came out, and I had some vague memories of it, and the one thing that I didn't remember out of it was that it was a horror movie. My recollection of it was that it was a religious suspense thriller kind of movie. Maybe had some blood and so forth in it, but horror, And having watched it, I can definitely see where it was coming from. My friend was actually urging me to watch it, and decided, okay, well, I'll watch it with a friend. That's no problem. But as far as whether or not to put it on this channel, I don't know. And when I looked it up on IMDb, it had it listed front and center as a horror movie in its metadata tags. And having watched it, I can see where it's coming from. I'm still a little on the fence about whether or not it's a horror. I would say I'm definitely leaning more towards it enough that I feel comfortable making a RotD review out of it. How I felt about it after having watched it again and having it fresh in my mind now is it was an interesting storyline that was marred by bad style. And to get into further details, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And the plot of this one followed Frankie, the character played by Patricia Arquette, as she is beset by receiving the stigmata, which is basically the wounds that Jesus Christ received upon the crucifixion. She started getting holes in her wrists and slashes in her back, and the crown of thorns wounds and in her feet and so forth. And that was basically progressing throughout the movie. The character of Father Andrew Kiernan, played by Gabriel Byrne, was sent by the Catholic Church to assess her situation, investigate, and help if possible. And he was reluctant to do so only because by the first interview he realized that Frankie was an atheist, and the stigmata is typically seen as a blessing given to only the absolute most devout religious folks. So the idea of this blessing being given to this person that doesn't believe in God was a bit out of the question. So it must be something else going on with her. Definitely not a church-involved thing. So the mystery continues from there, and it starts to get into some spoilery territory involving conspiracies and so forth. So the plot, I actually gave a 20 out of 25. As it was written, I thought it was a fairly compelling storyline. It was fairly compelling characters on the page, and I really didn't have a whole lot of complaints about it. It was it was an interesting take on things, how it started to kind of go from this interesting what-if scenario that had to do with this religious phenomenon and start going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, a little bit of a political kind of thriller going there, and integrating into it the Gospel of Thomas, which I've always been a bit fascinated by. And I just generally liked it. 20 out of 25 for the plot. No real complaints there. Any complaints that I have about this movie is definitely not on the written page. It's more in other categories. And the next one is intent. The intent I gave a 10 out of 25. I think that they were trying to have a very, very thrilling, captivating, character-driven, 100-mile-per-hour kind of movie, and I just didn't feel like it ever really got there. What wound up showing up on the screen, despite the fact that I really did like the plot, I thought wasn't very interesting. The characters were never really sold well. The style was extraordinarily distracting. I'm going to get into that with the technical. But whatever they intended to do, I thought it was like putting a marathon runner in the mud. No matter how much core skill may be present, you're holding it back and it's never going to achieve what you wanted until you take them out of the mud and let them do its thing. So yeah, 10 out of the 25 for the intent. The acting I gave a 14 out of 25. This one for me was a little disappointing. None of the acting was bad. Absolutely none of it. There really wasn't a whole lot of chemistry between the characters, and I think that had to do more with the direction and the editing more than the acting. But ultimately where I wound up was I really love Patricia Arquette. I really love Gabriel Byrne. I really love Jonathan Pryce, who was also in this. I didn't love any of the characters. And that was just really a darn shame. So, yeah, the range of emotions that these characters were having to deal with, I just didn't feel sold on much of any of them. Like I said, there wasn't really anything terribly bad about the acting. It's just for such a strong cast, it should have been better. So 14 out of 25. And the technical, I gave a 10 out of 25. The effects that were in this movie were actually pretty impressive. The level of detail involved with the writing of the Aramaic and so forth was flawed, but still stylistically it was impressive. The rest of the style of the movie, though, was just terrible and distractingly so. The pacing, the editing, the way that everything slowed down. The director, Rupert Wainwright, before this movie, he did Blank Check, a Disney movie that was kind of a throwaway, but mostly he directed music videos, NWA, MC Hammer at the time, a few others, and that's what this movie felt like, was that it was trying to feel like an hour and a half long music video where you just get the slow-mo with the doves floating around and the cloth flying through the air. It was just extraordinarily distracting, and it really could have had a lot more impact if it had kept it more simple, more grounded. When you have a character that's suffering these wounds, I think that's enough. I think that having that is enough, that you don't need them running out into the street, rain swept, pouring rain, slow motion running while she's in the middle of traffic and cars are running into each other trying to swerve to avoid her, and the whole thing's happening with this orchestral kind of crescendo operatic kind of thing going. Keep it more grounded than that. It doesn't need to be a music video. It can just be a character that we are connected with going through this hellacious time. And that will mean so much more than having this visual grandstanding happen. So, yeah, 10 out of 25 for the technical, which gives us a total of 54 out of 100 points. This is not a movie that I would recommend to people. It is also not a movie that I would tell people to avoid. If you want to watch Stigmata, by all means, go for it. It's just not one that is in my list of movies that are must watch. It's not. At this point, I would love to hear from you. If you agree with me, if you love this movie and you disagree with me, whatever, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.